this morning we're going for a walk in the mountains in Liuan. This is a favourite activity in such places. Nature, cleanliness, and no people. A remote farm, and we can see an interesting plantation. I noticed that nothing was harvested from it at all. Here's a sprout. I'm going to tear it off, it's huge. Usually in Liuan, a bud and 2 leaves are not collected, but the leaves only. Here all the leaves are already large, and I wonder why they're not harvested. I was told that this year there was no time, and tea harvesting costs money. There were no orders for this tea. I asked what kind of tea it was, and why there were no orders for it. I was told that they call him Sao Cha here. Sao means early, so it means early tea. The variety is called something else here, but it differs from most of the varieties that are grown here. Sao Cha means tea which is used to be ready. It can be collected much earlier than Ki Ming, in March, and that's why it has a very high price. Tea is usually expensive because it's the first, but it's not the most delicious, and that's why they don't order it every year. They didn't collect it this year. I think it's a pity because it was possible to collect raw materials and do something with them. But I was told that they have other plantations, and they're gathering there now. They said that next year they would just cut it, and if there was an order for it, they would make tea. Next to the Sao Cha plantation is the Ban Cha plantation, or as it is called here, Chi Cha, that is, tea for food. Such a strange name. I was told that this is the name of the variety, but I don't believe it. I think that this is definitely not a botanical name, but the local name of the bush, Chi Cha, looks like this. This is what a large amount of Liuan guapian is collected from. You can see it here, because it's not been collected from these bushes. Because to get workers for the sake of 4 bushes, it isn't worth it. This is Sao Cha, and it has a sprout. There's a striking difference, because they're grown at the same time, but they have different sized sprouts. You can clearly see this when one is ready to be collected. The other hasn't even come out yet. That's why this variety is called Sao Cha, an early tea that's ready for collection much earlier than the Liuan guapian that grows here. By the way, walking through the bamboo forest, I saw a protruding root, and it reminded me of an interesting story. The most elegant and valuable things made out of bamboo, including tea accessories, are often made from the roots and rhizomes. All sorts of interesting shapes are made from rhizomes. It's believed that the root of bamboo is stronger than the bamboo itself. Tea brushes are also made from roots. Various ornaments are made, covers and everything else. They make sticks, for example, for the tea ceremony. They're made not only for tea, but if we talk about tea accessories, it's very often possible to see, first of all, tea brushes, a beautiful curved structure. It's always the root. It's very easy to determine, because you can see such appendages from the common rhizome on each joint and each membrane. It looks nice. And so these parts of bamboo are very often used. Usually products made from roots are a little more expensive, because getting the roots out of the ground is not as easy as cutting the bamboo branches. Bamboo is an absolutely universal tree. Everything gets used from the roots to the branches. It grows quickly, So it's considered an infinite resource for production. Even the leaves of the bamboo are also used. They make tea out of these. It's also called Juye King, a green tea, made with fresh bamboo leaves. There's a sort of tea, and there are the bamboo leaves themselves. We've had them, and I think we'll have them again. Tea also has antiseptic properties. So when Yarek injured his finger, we wrapped it with tea leaves. It will heal faster. Here are the pickers collecting tea now, which will soon become our tea. Here in Liuan, we've done this more than once. I order a certain amount, and when I arrive, the tea begins to be collected, and then we watch how it's made. Then we taste it, and if you like it, we take it away. Very clearly you can see how the tea is collected here in Liuan. It looks very unusual because often everyone collects a bud and 2 leaves, but in Liuan they collect only a leaf. So after collecting only the leaves, there's a stalk left like this, which has a bud and 1 leaf at the top. The leaf that's next to the bud is usually not collected. They collect the leaves below, about 4 or 5 leaves. It depends where and how long the stalk is. The buds remain, and they are, by the way, very tasty. So we've eaten a few. It's a pity that such good remains here. They used to collect huangyao from the same bushes nearby. A few hours of travelling by car along the Serpentine Road, and you find yourself in Huashan. And in Huashan, they make huangyao, the yellow bud. They also make yingyao here, silver bud, and it's all bud teas. Either there is just a bud, or the bud and 2 leaves. There are only leaves, but the raw material for buds is very good. They make different tea here, so the buds are left out of business, and it's a pity. It is delicious, but each place has its own traditions, so it looks strange after the gathering. Usually all the buds are collected, and the bushes are bald. But here it's the opposite. There are long cuttings, and everything is in the buds. This means that the tea has been harvested. I clarified an interesting point. I noticed earlier that in Liuan, and in Anhui in general, it's very common, especially in the highlands, that you get small tea plots, then a lot of bamboo forest, and then a plot again, and then the forest again. I asked why. The Chinese are hard-working people, and in principle there are enough people. So why not do as in Yunnan and other provinces, where huge areas are simply cut down, and everything is planted with tea? In Anhui and many places in the north, where there are more densely populated areas, it's forbidden to cut down the forest, and even obtain permits for new plantings. This is especially true in mountainous areas. There's a large reservoir nearby, and this is a protected area, where it's forbidden to conduct any logging or additional planting. Moreover, our friend, who owns this particular plantation, told us that they look at aerial photography of the land, and if it turns out that a few dozen meters are cut down, they track it, and you can go to prison for a long time. I think that it's definitely good for nature, because there's a good balance here. Here 80% is forest and about 20% is tea plantations. In some places, tea plantations do not exceed perhaps 5 or 7% of the total area. It turns out that this means that the ecosystem is not disturbed during heavy rains, and landslides do not occur, because the tree roots hold the earth. I noticed that even in the middle of Plantations, I'm standing by a tree specifically. It's also necessary to plant trees. Not everywhere, but in many places. And the government always comes to some farmers, as planned, and tells them where to plant trees. The government indicates which plantation should stop developing and growing tea, and better grow bamboo or something else instead. This is quite strictly regulated, and the higher the land, the stricter the regulations. Naturally, if it's a national park, all is forbidden there, or allowed only in small territories. This is an incredible view from the plantation of the reservoir. There's a dam down there. It was built by Soviet workers. The dam provides water and electricity. There's also a hydroelectric power station that provides all of Liuan and the surrounding area. This is such a powerful structure, and it turned out very picturesque. Although old-timers say that there was a valley below, but there are a lot of such structures in China, especially in mountainous areas. There are a lot of people in China, and they need to provide everyone with water. Well, I think it looks very beautiful, because the water's incredible. By the way, there are a lot of fish, and you can see a lot of fishing boats. Someone breeds fish, but there are just people who fish by themselves, and that's it. On the other side, you can see a lot of tea plantations. It's very difficult to get there. There's almost no road. There are farms here, and a road has been built. On the opposite side, there are a lot of places where there's only a dirt road, and there's not even a normal road for a motorcycle. This place seems to be not very far away, only 100 kilometers from the city, but it feels like it's very far from any civilization. This is a very small factory. It's not even a factory, it's just a small room. Here it is. Here's a roasting pot, a basket for a small fire. There's also a large basket. It just lies on the street for Da Hua, a big fire. This is the final Hong Bei, which is very important in the production of Liuan guapian. This is the raw material that's going to be used to make huangya, or yellow bud. It's also made here, but not so much. The main demand is for guapian. Just for raw materials, there's a bud and even 4 leaves. They collect higher raw materials. This is a late harvest. In addition, this tea is more mass-produced. Usually, farmers who produce a small amount of tea rarely sell it to someone separately. Usually they hand it over, and everything is mixed with hundreds of different manufacturers, and it all goes to a larger company that deals with tea. Every time I come here, everyone thinks, why does he need only 3 or 5 or 7 kilograms of tea? Because they just don't have any more. Nevertheless, it's clear that we're engaged in something more mass-produced. It's just an interesting thing to do, because you can see the original source. Here it is. And so yes, it is inconvenient, but it's very interesting. We're going on a little river trip. You can even say that this is a lake walk, because this is the main Liuan reservoir. And now it's very beautiful. I love the rain, and this weather is doubly pleasant to find on the water. There are no tourists yet, and everyone is sheltering somewhere. For the Chinese, if it rains, that's it. Doesn't mean that they don't do anything, but at least they don't rest. We drove a lot along the plantations, and I see that they're collecting tea, putting raincoats on. It happens that tea made from raw materials that were collected in the rain can not always be good, but now we've learned to dry tea in different ways. There are lots of options. The main thing is that they check what happened. When you constantly go to the plantations and factories, the change of environment to water seems something very surprising and unusual. In fact, we're still close to the plantations, because there's tea all around us. Now there's a primary roasting. This tea I first called Huangyao, but here it's called differently, Yeisheng. Although it's not wild, it's a local tradition. Different local people call the same things different names in different regions. There are similar technologies. For example, it's very similar to the production of Liuan guapian, completely manual roasting. This particular family is retired. They have a very small house. They're distant relatives of our friend. A husband and wife who have a very modest household. They have limited use of electricity, so they can't afford electric machines. It's not something they want to do manually, because it takes longer to produce. They just can't afford it. They're very poor. And so they make such a wild-grown Yeisheng chai. By the way, we already have this in our collection. We bought it last year. This year, if it turns out to be good, we will also take it. The people are very nice and simple, and make good, delicious tea. The weather has completely deteriorated today. We'll spend some time in Liuan and go to Hushan. We have an express transfer as time is short, and we need to visit a lot of places. The atmosphere here is completely different. When you get out of the city and find yourself here, you don't want to go back to any city, especially a Chinese city. Behind me is the basket where xiao ho is made. They have the entire production cycle in one small room. After xiao ho, da ho will be made. The tea is made using traditional technology. At the bottom of the basket there are coals, slightly sprinkled with ash. The temperature is regulated. It should not be too high or too low. Everything remains in the basket, and the tea languishes. This is such a drying, and it's done repeatedly. I showed this process in more detail earlier. I think we'll look at this process in another place, if we can get there. We went to the other guys. Here no one does anything except tea, so it was not so far to go to the next guys. In rainy weather, climbing the slopes is not very convenient. There are a lot of such houses that are located at such a distance from each other that you can only walk. Often you can't drive up there on anything, and often these houses are located right in the forest. Only the plantations are visible. Here's one of the houses where this owner lives. It also has a small production facility. Now we're heating up the furnace to warm up the boiler. Because of the heavy rain, the raw material is very wet, so the owner throws the leaf into a machine to get the moisture out. He just shakes it off to get the water off the leaf, and only then the tea begins to fry. Wet raw materials are not fried, as the tea immediately spoils. Now the process has begun. In general, it's very nice to sit by a furnace in the rain and warm up. The furnaces are here to cook food, and in rainy weather, this is a good way to dry your clothes. These furnaces are organised very simply. There's a small hole in the roof that allows the smoke to escape. A very simple device. A firebox, boiler on top, and that's it. Well, except the painstaking and meditative work of roasting. The next production room is very loud for a small production, but nevertheless, in general, there's an original technology. The floor is cleaned, and the tea is placed on it, next to a fan that expels moisture. After that, roasting and all the other stages begin. The room here is slightly larger than that of the retired neighbours, but it's also such a small factory. It's very similar to the one where I was, where they did a lot of material on the production of Liuan guapiang. Now we're looking at what's happening here and waiting for the results of this harvest. But I don't really want tea which was collected today. I'll ask them to make another one for us when the weather is better. It's raining a lot now. On the other hand, it all depends on the skill. You can make good tea even in this weather. It's important to taste it. If you don't taste, you won't understand anything. Enjoy your tea.